And we're live. Hello, reader friends.
Hello, reader friends. We're having our book party over here. Halloween.
Party over here.
Halloween book party. Woohoo. Dread Nation in the House by Justina Ireland. YGBC. It's happening. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Yay. And I'm all dressed up. Hello.
Meghin wins.
I tried to be on brand. I'm a zombie.
Super zombie. You look like you just look like someone from the book.
That was the plan.
You just need the yellow contacts.
Oh yeah. I wasn't gonna do costume contacts because I've heard so many bad things about them.
Yeah, that's probably smart. I have my gargoyle reading shirt, which is the closest thing to a Halloween shirt, and bat earrings.
And the sparkly eyeshadow. We love a sparkly eye.
Cool, guys. Say hi in the chat, please. Say hi to us. Let us know you're here. We've been so excited for this because we just don't get to do this that much. Have a ball while we actually talk about our book of the month. I mean, it is a ball, but I feel like we're so serious.
We are.
Obviously not that serious.
Yeah, for once we don't have a serious one. So
yeah. Well, let's do it again. We'll do it a little more often. Because like we were saying when we were on the Rethinking Humanity podcast, shout out to that. That was super fun. Thank you, Lacey and Sonia. We were talking about how this type of stuff, reading fiction and having fun with it is important too, because it builds community and it keeps people together. And that's important too, even though it's not changing the world. It's we have to have those things that bring us together and are fun.
Yeah. And it might change your world, you. So I've had fiction that changes my world. So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
The Hunger Games. That was one that I was saying changed my world a little bit.
Yeah. Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, for sure.
So
cool.
If you guys are here, drop us a hello. If you're dressing up, let us know what you're dressing up as. Yeah. I know this is kind of a weird Halloween. It's the first time it's been on a Saturday in a while, and we're all stuck inside.
Just one more thing COVID threw at us was this is the year you get Halloween on a Saturday. Have fun, guys.
Wah wah.
So that's why we were you know what, we're just gonna do it on Halloween because probably a lot of people are gonna be in, especially at this hour.
Yeah.
Maybe you're putting on all your makeup right now and you have us playing in the background. I also actually have wine.
I don't have anything.
My witch's brew and my other witch's brew, which is full of Snickers and Twix. So
yum.
I might actually eat on camera this time because it's right in front of me.
Nice. I got some brains chilling in the fridge to snack on later.
Good. Brought those brains. We are a Fake Carter book club.
Yes. Brains. It's what Yang Gang snacks on. Yes. So again, if you guys are here, let us know. Say hello. Let us know if you've read the book. We're going to start with a non-spoiler discussion. And then at some point, I'll throw a banner up that says spoiler alert. So you guys know that from then on, we're going to be talking about some spoilers. And then if you're one of those people that's I'd rather someone tell me about it than read it, then listen to the spoiler alert.
Yeah. Maybe you're someone who really just only reads nonfiction, but we're going to have a good time either way. So hang around and have a good time with us, and you can hear us talk about all the juicy secrets of this book, because this book has a lot in it. It's not even that short per se.
It's pretty long. It's pretty action-packed the entire time too. I literally finished it in 2 days. and then I got the sequel and finished
Yes.
in like 2 days, which that one's called Deathless Divide. I forgot my copy. It's on my desk, but I have this one, and that's what's important. But it's just so action-packed the entire time. And I wish I could spoil the second book for you guys, but I know Kateri is probably going to read it, so...
Thank you, Megan. I would appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's not even, it's like action-packed, but not at the same time, because like, it's not like there's zombies at every corner. It's not one of those kind of zombie books, right? It's like, it's one of those zombie books where it's like the monsters are not just the zombies. Like the monsters, the almost the real monsters are the people inside the walls of these walls that they put up, which we'll get into more of that too. But that was something I really appreciated about this zombie story. And I think, as a disclaimer, both Megan and I are not huge zombie people.
I'm not. Despite
you are. What was that?
I said, despite the way I'm dressed right now, I'm actually not a big zombie fan.
Yeah. So if you are, like, feel free to let us know if we're like just not that cool and like we're not hip to the zombie, thing in some way. If we say something where you're like, oh no, like that's common or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, based on my encounters with zombies so far, I feel like, they, especially like TV shows, they like really focus on like the guts and the gore and stuff like that. And there's some of that in here.
Oh yeah, there has to be.
I mean, there's some really like terrible moments that involve like children. Like I was shocked. I was like, like that made it into this is a YA novel if you haven't figured that out yet. So yeah,
she definitely go back. It's just it's the theme of the novel is like, yes, there are definitely zombies. It's a zombie story, but the theme is actually pretty political,
right?
Which wasn't on purpose, guys. I promise.
Yeah, it was literally just like this book. We hadn't read it before we picked it. We were just like, this seems like fun. It's like perfect. We knew we wanted to do something fun for Halloween. And it was like the fact that it was, a young Black woman in like post Civil War, Reconstruction era, kind of gave a sense that, yeah, there would probably be some political elements to it, but we had no idea how incredibly political this was. And it was badass. I was so like, this is awesome while I was reading it.
Yeah, very, very strong female leads. I think that's one of the things I love the most about this book is that the female characters never needed like someone to step in and save them, which is something I really loved. In fact, they were the ones doing the saving a lot of the times. Especially I think it was like the white men that couldn't do they could do the least. They were doing the least and expecting the most. And they had all of these females of color stepping in to save their butts.
Yeah. And obviously it's not like that's what we want in real life, but to see that specific type of representation in a book this big, like I think that was just, it was really nice. It felt refreshing to me. I'm like, I've never read a book like this before. And you and I like to read for fun, so we do read it quite a bit. I think before we get any further, we should like actually give a like non-spoiler summary of the book.
Yeah.
So do you want to go ahead and do that?
Oh, you want me to?
Well, let's do it together, but I'll let you get started.
Okay, so basically, I think this is pretty non-spoiler because it's literally on the back of the book. But this book is taking place in a post-Civil War time. And the reason the Civil War ended, actually, is because of zombies. And they call them shamblers in the book. But essentially, these shamblers rise up from the dead. And now there's another enemy to fight. And so throughout the book, you are following Jane in particular, who's the main character, through the book as she is going through schooling, I guess we could call it.
Yeah, zombie education.
Yeah, zombie education. And yeah, you can take the next part. I'm trying to like, how do I say it without spoiling?
Yeah, well, I think it does kind of get at in the when you read like the summary before you like actually read the book, is that it starts out that she's in the East
Mm-hmm.
and she's at this school, and then she gets doesn't really get into how it happens, but she ends up getting shipped out against her will
Mm-hmm.
to this like town in the West, which we found it's in Kansas,
Kansas.
right?
Yep.
In Kansas. So she's kind of not proper in the West. So it's like very much like the Wild West, right? It's like neither or. And they're kind of close to the South, which that you do find out. I don't think it's like a spoiler. Like you do find out that like, the war was really fought in the South. So the uprising of all the dead, where all these people were newly dead, was in the South. And so Texas is like apparently just kind of like gone at this point. Like it's completely overrun by, it's like a shambler city. So it's like interesting the way that this shifts the whole dynamic of the country at this point in history. So I like that. But anyway, so she ends up over there. She also has kind of a frenemy, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I think of it.
Yeah.
And they over the course of the book, their friendship grows and strengthens, and it's like one of my favorite parts of the book. With this woman named Catherine, young woman named Catherine, who she's different from Jane. The main character is Jane. Jane is like a really like good, kind of dedicated, even though she also is just doing it because she has to. But she's naturally a very good shambler slayer. I feel like we're gonna butcher that a few times today. Shambler slayer. And then Catherine's good, but she is more interested in like the feminine arts.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
very
also interested
prim and proper.
Yeah, she likes to wear the corsets and the heels and the dresses and stuff like that. And Jane does not really care. And the interesting thing about Catherine is that she like passes for white because she's only part white, part black, so she passes for white, and so that ends up playing an interesting role later, which we'll get to when we actually get to the spoiler part. So this book really talks about race. It talks about race. It talks about being a woman of color. It talks about slavery, and then the zombies kind of come in. It gets enmeshed with that. But then specifically to do with like after the fact of slavery. So I think it ends up actually being a little bit more of a critique of like Jim Crow in a way.
Yeah, there's some very, I'll say like hard historical truths that Justina gets into within the scope of a fiction book, but it's very real history that she's using. It's almost like a rewrite of history as if zombies were real. And she just does a very good job, I think, of using that history. She did a lot of research too, which is really, really cool. I was reading like her little excerpt at the end where she's the author's notes, and she's kind of talking about how she really did a lot of research into that, and that was something she wanted to do. And I think that was a really cool aspect of it because it made it way more real and like believable of a story.
Yeah.
I want to say too, one of the interesting parts, and this is still non-spoilery because this is a huge chunk of the book, is that the place that they eventually get shipped to against their will in Kansas, it's a place called Summerland, and it's supposed to be this like utopia. And I think that is a theme that for sure we see all the time in real life, where people are like, oh no, this is going to be the perfect way to do society. No, this is the perfect way to do society. No, this, and within all of these utopias, there's someone always winning. And there are always going to be people that are losing. And, usually when you think like utopia, you think, oh, everyone's winning. But that's just never how it ends up working. And it definitely goes into a lot of those themes within that as well. And, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of parallels to pandemics.
Okay, so, right, there totally is. So it was just almost creepy to me how like perfect this book was.
Yeah.
Like for everything happening right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to read some of these quotes. For those of you who don't know, and this is, I think, even more important to know for like next month when we're not reading or reading a book that doesn't have spoilers, which we will announce at the end. What we do on our Twitter page, YG Book Club, is we share quotes from the book throughout the whole month. And so Twitter doesn't seem to like those, so they don't tend to like do very well. So if you want to see those, like maybe you can't pick up the book one month, but you want to participate, you can get like five quotes a week. Sometimes we post as many, like we post one every day during the week. And you can basically get those quotes, and we'll discuss those quotes at the end. So you can really participate even without buying the book if you know, especially if you can't. So anyway, we did that this month for this too, even though it was a little harder with being a fiction month, but we did have a few. And so this is the one that I think applies to what you were just talking about, Megan. And there's so much in this quote. So it's a little, bear with us. It's a little hard without the context. I'm just going to read it, and then we'll get into any questions if you have them. So, people wanted to believe them, I mutter, thinking about poor Othello from the lecture and his willingness to die for Professor Gehring's delusions. They wanted everything to go back to the way it was before the war, before the killing, the shamblers, the walls, all of it. That's how men like the mayor maintain control. You believe strongly enough in an idea, nothing else much matters. So that, to me, like that calls up lots of things, actually, I think to do with like COVID time right now. And like, you hear so much about like when things go back to normal, there's even like I thought she was being probably pretty intentional, bringing up things about walls. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk of walls in the whole book. And then just the idea of that kind of, I think in a basic way, you can say, what's it called? Sheep mentality? That's not it.
Herd
mentality.
Herd mentality.
Herd mentality. Which is, I think, getting at the idea of being like a sheep and being a follower or whatever. Yeah. And so I think it's, you know, she definitely is commenting on, you kind of see in different instances, like the masses having this kind of parallel to the shamblers, right? I think that's the big thing in a book like this, is that the author is probably constantly finding ways to play on the idea of a zombie and bring those elements out into the real world. And so I definitely got that sense where you could tell she was really trying to show a population overall that was kind of this undead, like unthinking, kind of soulless population of people that weren't technically shamblers, like they still had a soul apparently. But yeah, that was kind of the sense that I got from that.
Yeah.
And so let's see. And then another thing that was really interesting was the way that she talks about using the schools.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was like, she was taking inspiration from actual schools where the government pulled out Indian children unwillingly from their families and put them in a school to basically take away their culture.
Yeah, re-education schools.
Re-education schools. So that is what inspired the schools in this book, which is actually, in this case, it's all Black and brown people. White people only go to them if they're like, oh, I want to serve my country and I want to, it's like this honorable thing. Whereas there's lots of different talk about how they see, you know, Black and brown people as needing help and needing direction and not being able to fend for themselves and having to like do their duty to their country because of what happened in the war and stuff like that. So the way that they justify passing this law, it's I forget exactly what it's called. I have it here, I'll find it. But there's this law that's like sort of like the Re-Education Act or something like that, and how they get people to have to come out to these schools. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and the way they kind of like skirt the, oh, this isn't slavery thing is once they graduate and they become attendants, that's what they call them, they do get paid. It's not enough to live on, really, but they do get paid. And so that's kind of how they skirt a little bit of the rules, I guess, which is interesting because I think that's kind of a theme within our country as well, is that we're always trying to find some way to, enslave people somehow.
Right, and then just find whatever way we can justify it. Like,
yeah.
So that's definitely like explored in the book. Okay, so what other elements? Should we talk about the characters a bit?
We can. I also wanted to share one of the quotes real fast that kind of got to me. I mean, I have lots of them. We could talk forever. But I think one of the things that Jane, who is the main character, talks about a lot of the time is living, is like people's expectations of her. And if you guys have your own copy, on page 63, she's talking to Kate and she says, sometimes you have to live down to people's expectations, Kate. If you can do that, you'll get much further in life. And basically she's talking about how she'll just act like a, dumb, educated little female who doesn't know anything, even though the reality is like she's this really smart person, but basically to just get through life. And that's kind of what a lot of the book is, actually, even with Catherine having to pass as white sometimes, is that you're kind of pretending to be someone you're not in order to survive, which kind of goes into like one of the other themes of like how humans adapt no matter what we're going through. Like, we always find some way to adapt. Now, that doesn't mean we're comfortable, for sure. That doesn't always mean that we're comfortable, but we are resilient, and we do find ways to fall in love in the worst of times, or make new friends in the worst of times, So I think that is like a big theme throughout, is that humanity always finds a way. And sometimes that way isn't great. Sometimes it's really despicable and ugly. And sometimes it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, like what we just reminded me about how Jane is this expert code switcher. And, like we could not read that out loud. It's like she's doing like I don't know if you've seen like old movies, like Shirley Temple movies, like the way that they would have African-American people speak, which is incredibly racist. Like they were dumb. And so I think there's a lot of play there on like this level of humanity where she's like using this thing that white people are like, this is how you are, that determines your intelligence. But she's being more intelligent. She's using that thing, that marker that they have to like deem her intelligence. She's using it to trick them and get them to do what she wants them to do. And sometimes that thing is saving their goddamn lives.
Yes. And you know what? Like, I'm not going to lie. There have been plenty of times where I have felt threatened by a male, because I was just telling you this earlier. I'm like 5'3". I'm a small person. I'm stronger than I look, I promise. But sometimes, there are situations where I genuinely feel threatened by, and I will say most of the time it is by males. And so I will act dumb because I'm afraid if I act smarter than them, or if I know more than them, that they're going to feel threatened and then they're going to take it out on me. And I don't do well with confrontation. And then there are times where I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to, but there are definitely times where I will act dumb. And then there are times where I will act dumber than I am, to get my way. I'm not going to lie. And I think plenty of girls have done that before. I would say probably especially as like teenagers, like little teenage girls who just like, oh, I'll act all sweet and, cuddle up to you and act all, oh, I don't know a single thing. Buy me popcorn, like, so definitely there are times. And so it's interesting because I think that that's definitely something that we as females kind of do sometimes to make the men around us feel smarter. whether that's to get something or just self-preservation. And that's definitely something that she does.
Yeah, there definitely can be kind of like it's not even a good side and a bad side. It's just like a more like necessary side and then a more like devious side. And one of my favorite quotes, this isn't like super necessary, but I did actually share this. This is Jane. Here's the thing about me. I have always considered pursuing a life on the stage if this whole killing the dead thing doesn't work out.
Yeah.
When I read it, so
she would have been good at it too.
Yeah, she definitely would. Not just, it's beyond code switching. She would like do all sorts of different things. So she was such a cool main character. She was the best main character for this type of book, where she was not perfect. She definitely would make mistakes, I guess, but then she also was just really, really smart. And even when you knew she was probably making the wrong decision and it was going to end up not working out, you were like, I get why she's doing this. Like, it's do or die, like the situation that she's in. And sometimes I think, like with YA especially, you get that like, why are you doing this? YA, and then also horror. YA gets a bad rap for it. Horror, people just laugh at it, but they're the same exact thing. You're like, why are you doing this?
Yes.
This is really dumb. You are going to die. But in this situation, it's a lot more, it's honestly just more like, no, you have to take risk, because you have to, it gets to a certain point, without spoiling anything, it gets to a certain point where it's like, it's all kind of riding on her shoulders. And, she's got a lot of people that are depending on her to figure things out and to like get them to safe ground, metaphorically and literally. So yeah. So do we have any more quotes that we want to share? I think we have a little more time before we get into spoilers.
Yeah. Page 81. It's a cruel, cruel world, and the people are the worst part. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think that definitely gets at what we were talking about earlier, with how like the monsters aren't always the monsters. I'm trying to find the one where she's describing one of the shamblers. I can't find it. Maybe it's over in this one. It was definitely interesting the way that the shamblers were portrayed. It wasn't like, here, I found it. It wasn't like necessarily anything crazy out of the box. They were zombies.
Yeah.
But there's moments where she does kind of I think play with it a little bit, or just tries to blur the boundaries there. So this is, I'll give a little context. This is a moment where she gives some flashbacks, and sometimes flashbacks in a novel really annoy me. They're really good in this book. They give a lot of very important context, and they also end up leading to a big truth bomb that gets dumped at the end. So if you read the book or want to hear the spoiler for that, stick around. So this is a flashback to when she's a kid, and it's her first time seeing like a live shambler for the first time. She was with a bunch of other kids. And there's like a shambler that's like stuck on a stake. Anyway, we stopped, and all the celebration and shouting died down real quick. I'd always imagined the dead as some kind of monster, mouth gaping as they came to eat you. But the shambler caught in the barbed wire looked almost normal. A white woman with long brown hair pinned up on her head, wearing a day dress of green linen. Her eyes were the yellow of crookneck squash, and the nails of her grasping hands had been broken down, her fingers covered with dirt. Still, I recognized her. So it was just like this really interesting moment where when I was reading that, I just really envisioned like you right now, Megan.
Yeah, like you look like a person.
You look like a person still, right?
Yeah,
and like you just imagine that, like actually seeing. I think she ends up revealing that this is a woman that she knew. she wasn't close with her, but she did know her. So like, could you imagine like seeing your neighbor, like a real human being that you knew, that you had pleasant interactions with, just like stuck on the thing, and they're like, their eyes are all crazy and they're all covered in dirt, and but then you know that they're like dead. It's just, yeah, that was a intense moment for me.
Yeah, and I think it's because of that, like because they still do look human. I think that's why sometimes they all kind of get in these little mini existential crises where they're kind of like, how do I kill this thing that used to be someone that I knew and loved? But then she kind of says, I think on page 83 is where I have it. She said, so that's what I think about when I slay shamblers. Not who they might have been and what kind of life there is after death, but how them being gone makes the people I care about safer, and how each body gets me closer to getting home back to my mama. And so that's something that I kind of have to think about, because sometimes these are people that they knew and loved and were really close to. And, they have to cut off their head,
Yeah.
and so hence the, but they have to cut off their head, and so it's just kind of this, almost like they're killing their friends and their family. And they have to live with that. Yeah. And that's kind of how they live with it is, this isn't someone I know, they're already gone. And this is just getting me one step closer to protecting those around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this, I don't know, like there's a lot, like, okay, I'll be honest, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't seen Get Out yet. I think I will watch it. I'm just like really bad with horror.
You'll be fine.
It's apparently not that scary. So I'm like, okay, I think I will watch that one. I took a class on, oh, sorry, what?
I said it's more of a psychological thriller.
Yeah, cool. I did take a class when I was in my English major on Native American horror. And we did not watch Get Out. Was it out? Yeah, I think it was. We watched actually a clip from 12 Years a Slave, which I also have not seen the whole film, but the clip is like a man who's, as like a punishment, who has been like strung from his neck and is literally keeping himself alive by dancing on the tips of his toes. And it's this long scene where you're just watching him for like 2 minutes straight. And stuff like that, so the whole class was like functioning around this idea of like horror. The horror genre is typically whitewashed. And there's real life horror for a lot of people of color and a lot of indigenous people and people, that came out of slavery and descendants of slaves and, that kind of thing. We also watched Candyman, which is another one that kind of gets into some of those themes too, which is that's an 80s film. So anyway, yeah, so I think that like this book definitely does that. And I think the fact that because it's not a horror book though, it has these just moments that are gruesome and terrifying. But the overall book is not meant to be a horror. Yeah. And so I think it almost says more in a way that way, where her idea of having to survive and having to kill as this normal thing, having to kill to survive as this normal thing, as definitely being a critique of what it's like just being, a person of color in the real world. And so yeah, I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. So anyone who is in the chat, please say hi. We're going to keep talking. I think we've kind of covered a good majority of the book at this point, though. Do you agree, Meghin?
Yeah, I think it's getting about that time.
About that time for spoilers. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll see how much we'll get into spoilers. And then maybe this would be a good transition. This is something I wanted to talk about. So this is not necessarily a spoiler, but maybe throw it up anyway, just in case. I don't know. So we're there, guys. We made it to the spoiler section. What did you? So first of all, Megan and I actually haven't talked about this that much. We definitely wanted to save our thoughts for this live stream. What did you think of the moment when they started singing? I mean, we can almost like call them, they're not slaves, right? They're freed, but it's like they're living in a type of slavery. So you have all these people that we've gotten to Summerland. Jane meets all the people there who are basically forced to protect them.
You're being paid, but they can't leave if they choose. Like, they can't go anywhere.
Right. And the pay isn't enough to survive on. So it's like basically slavery.
Yeah.
And so they're forced to patrol, and they also don't have like proper weapons. And so then they're out and they start singing, and I'm not gonna sing, but I can. It's one of those ones where it's only as powerful as it can be when you're reading it, because in your head you can kind of imagine what the song would sound like and what it feels like and everything. But I'll go ahead and read the lyrics to this song, was the part of it. I don't have the page number. Megan's better about that. Sorry, guys. Okay, so when those shamblers gather round, honey, honey. When those shamblers gather round, baby, baby. When those shamblers gather round, swing your scythe and bring them down, honey, oh baby mine. So it's definitely like, one of those old, I mean, it's like basically playing on the songs that slaves used to sing when they were actually working the plantation. And I don't think it serves too much of a greater purpose here. Like there's no like code or whatever. But I think it was just a really like important symbolic moment. And that moment really, really hit me, like listening to that. I almost cried. But it wasn't even like I was like really sad. It was just so like, took me by surprise. And it was just so both amazing and terrible at the same time.
Yeah. And I think part of that, I'm echoing. Sorry. Do you hear it, or is it just me?
I can't really hear it.
Okay, as long as we're good. So I think part of that too is because, so even when Jane grew up on a plantation, and her mom, and I'm trying to remember if the big secret we found out about her mom was in this book or the next one.
It's in this one. It's in this one. We're going to talk about that one at the end.
Yes. And so there's this huge secret about her mom. But essentially, Jane grows up in the plantation, and her mom's actually the lady of the plantation. But of course, Jane wasn't white. And so even the man of the plantation didn't know that was her mom, which I don't know if they give us her name. They don't know that that's her daughter. And so, but she's still kind of growing up on the plantation, not as a slave, because technically they're not slaves anymore, but not even really so much as like a maid or anything either. She's kind of like her pet almost.
Yeah. She's
not like pet as in like an animal, but pet as in like that. She's her favorite.
There's a name for it.
Yeah, obviously she shows her a lot of her, and she's kind of like, kind of kept from a lot of the horrors that other people have to live. And then when she's at the re-education school, where they learn to fight, she's also still kind of kept, because they're supposed to be ladies. So they are kind of given these chances to be educated. They're not really allowed to read, but they're allowed to go to lectures at universities, and they're taught how to wear corsets and how to do their hair, because they still need to look respectable. And so I think to me that moment was kind of like Jane really seeing what it was like for her people, because she never really got to live it. And so that was kind of her glimpse into what it truly was to be a Black person or an Indian person living during this time. because she had been kind of shielded in a way from that. The only horrors she really knew were the Shamblers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of because she had an attitude. That's one of the things we loved about her. She had this attitude. And the reason she had this attitude is because like no one had really crossed her before. She didn't have a ton of contact with white people besides her instructors or the people that lived around. She didn't have a lot of contact with them. And so most of the people she interacted with were other people of color. And so I think this was a time where she really kind of connected with other people of color in a situation that she was never in before. And I think to me, that's kind of why it was so poignant, is because that was kind of her really, truly seeing, I guess, what they had been living through before that she never experienced.
Because this is why book clubs are awesome, because I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, well, because this is kind of another spoiler, but basically she was born, the day she was born, 3 days after she was born is when the dead started walking. So she's never known a time when there weren't Shamblers. Right. Too. And so I don't know. So to me, that's why it was so beautiful, because it was kind of her, it was kind of like that connection, I guess, to that past that she never really had to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's terrible to say, but it's like it is kind of her roots in a way, you know, because like we find out what her real ancestry is, and so her mom was able to escape slavery in a way because she was able to pass. So
that to the end, by the way.
Yeah, you find that out.
You know, because the whole time they even talk about how her mom has been having affairs with the field workers.
Yeah.
She likes the big strapping field hands is what she says. And the whole time you're thinking, oh, okay, this is just a white lady who likes to sleep with, not like people, like men of color. Yeah. And which like isn't that scandalous? That's always been a thing, but it's just kind of like scandalous because you're thinking the whole time, oh, Jane is like the product of one of these affairs. And then at the end, Jane's talking about some of the horrible things that she's had to do. One of them being killing her father. Yeah. Only you find out her father is the man of the plantation. He's the white man in charge. And so you're like, I remember reading that, and that, okay, I'm usually pretty good at figuring out like twists and turns, but that one truly, I was like, what?
Well, it's the one that like, who would see that? Because it's so expertly set up. There's no mystery to solve. Like in a way there is, because you can kind of be like, well, we don't know who her dad is, so that might come into play, but it's just not put in a way that's like at all important to the story. So that's not something that's on your mind as a reader. You're much more concerned with how the heck is she going to get out of Summerland.
Yes.
And then it just hits you with that over the head at the end. You're like,
yes. And the reason this kind of comes up is because she's kind of like, because Jane's this really like dark, tortured person. She really, really is. And one of the things that Catherine always kind of notices about her is that she just doesn't hesitate to kill anything, really. Yeah. Doesn't hesitate and actually seems to enjoy it. Whereas everyone else kind of does it because they have to survive. Jane seems to really like it. And so one of the reasons they kind of talk about that is Jane has to end up, we'll go into this maybe next, I don't know. But Jane ends up having to kill somebody who's not a Shambler, like two somebodies. And it's one of those things where she's kind of like, how can you just do that? And like, it doesn't faze you.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really faze her when she does it, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, zero hesitation.
Yeah, she's well prepared to kill a living person. And so I mean, Justina Ireland is like one of my new favorite authors. Like she just does not hold back.
So good. Oh my gosh. Like
she does have a little bit of a backlist. I think she's got like one other novel.
She does.
But we can just talk about that whole what's the phrase for it? The explosion at the
Yeah. So they end up. They were in Baltimore, somewhere near Baltimore, which I can remember because that's where I'm near. And they were in there, and they got sent to Summerland by the mayor because the mayor was like trying to build this town where white people are in charge again. And again, kind of alluding to some parallels with reality, where, you know, he's trying to make it so that white people are the ones in charge and everyone else is just working for them, and trying to make it's Shambler free. We have this big wall, no one can get in. They have electricity.
Yeah,
that being a big thing. And the whole thing that kind of starts this off is some scientist, some doctor says, "Oh, I have a vaccine. I've created a cure."
Yeah.
And of course, it ends up not being a cure. And Jane ends up she saves the mayor's wife, is what happens. She saves the mayor's wife. And then gets invited with Catherine, because Catherine saves them too. They end up getting invited to the mayor's mansion. And during the dinner, at this time, they had said that Baltimore had no shamblers. There were 0 shamblers in Baltimore. It was one of the
0 cases of shamblers.
Yeah, 0 cases of shamblers. And they get to the party, and in the middle of the dinner, a guest starts turning, which is how they describe it. A guest starts turning. And Jane has to basically put him down in the middle of dinner. And then everyone's freaking out, like, how dare you kill the shambler in the middle of my fancy dinner? And she's like, well, you were about to be dinner, so I don't know what you want. But during this time where they're all kind of freaking out, Jane and one of her friends / lovers, which she has many throughout this book and the sequel, she and one of her like on again, off again guys sneak into the mayor's office, I guess is what it was, like his chamber, and try to find some dirt. And they were kind of like, why would someone be bitten at the mayor's house? Like, how would this even happen?
Yeah.
Because there's not supposed to be any shamblers in Baltimore, let alone inside the mayor's house.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how they get shipped to Summerland, is they get caught.
But they get sold out by Miss Preston.
Yeah, so it turns out Miss Preston, who like was over this, like it was like the best school for like attendance in the East. It was like one of the best. They had the best weapons. They had the best girls that came out of it. And Miss Preston seems like this really like caring white woman who like kind of really cared for all these girls, even though she was white. And that's how they portrayed her. And she even stuck up for Jane several times and even seemed to favor her.
Yeah.
And then it turns out Miss Preston was sending girls to this city. They're called, I think they were called the Survivalists.
Well, there's like a survivalist party.
Yes.
And so they're kind of unofficially behind most of the wrongdoing that's happened in the book.
Mm-hmm. And they're kind of like the white supremacists.
And they're basically the white supremacists.
Yeah, they're the white supremacists in this society.
Survivalists of the white people.
Yes, essentially, using everyone else to save us. And so they get, Miss Preston sells them out, and Jane and Jackson, or she also calls him Red Jack, they get sent away, but then they also send Catherine. And the reason they send Catherine is essentially because she's too pretty. Is what it comes down to. They said,
like, you're not going to get a job. You're too pretty. No one's going to want you, like, by them next to them. distracted
Basically.
from.
So she got shipped away too because she always did everything right. She never broke the rules. She tried to make sure Jean never broke the rules, and she ended up getting shipped away too. And she's like, "Why?"
Yeah.
And like, "Well, you're just too pretty."
Yeah.
So that's how they get shipped to Summerland. And do you want to take it away about what Summerland is?
Yeah. So Summerland is just, it's where, you know, they're trying to like we said, create this utopia, which I think is interesting because it, to me, ended up, I realized like later, like utopia, it's under the guise of like utopia as in not Shambler. Like we have these walls, it's really secure, it's really like there's order, you know, there's not chaos. So we don't have Shamblers. But really, I think what the point of the whole thing was really not about the Shamblers, because it's like if that was really the case, then why did they do such a terrible job keeping the if they really cared about that, they would have not just, you know, put it on the ex-slaves, like, you know, on the black and brown people. I think what the Summerland really is functioning as is like, no, this return to slavery. Like, you know, survivalists are really just, like we said, like the white supremacists. And so that's, I think, I didn't necessarily think of it that much while I was reading it. It was more after that I was thinking about it that way. So it's like this really just like trying to create another slave state, you know? And so, so yeah, so, you know, that's basically what it is. And so Jane and Catherine get there. Catherine, so interestingly, or Jane also interestingly sets Catherine up, kind of forces her into having to be a white woman because she can pass as white. Mm-hmm. And so she kind of saves her in a way. And, you know, that's her intention, which was an interesting moment because that was still kind of early in their friendship. You know, they definitely started out as frenemies. So I think it was kind of like that was maybe the start of it, where they had, you know, a small portion of the book is when they're traveling. And so they had gotten through that difficult time together, and she had seen Catherine kind of get through that time, and she had before not a very high regard of Catherine. Mm-hmm. And so I think her regard for her has grown a little bit. So she still looks down on her, but she's like, oh, like I'm going to like help her out and do that for her. And so she kind of like tells the sheriff, like she's a white lady, like, you know, she code switches and like uses her like dumb drawl to like convince him that like lowers herself to like heighten Catherine. So I thought that was interesting. And so for a while, we mostly just see Jane while she's there. And this is where it does slow down a bit. And she's like really just finding out all the secrets of Summerland. One of the craziest, which I was kind of thinking, you brought up the electricity. And then now I remember, I was trying to think of kind of the role that plays. And I think it's pretty much made clear when this is a little bit later, but we're jumping ahead a little bit. But Gideon, who's one of the characters who becomes white, Jane kind of like is cool. Like she kind of has multiple love interests in a way, which I always really enjoy because YA is known for doing that trope of like insta love and like we're meant to be. And she's like really fancying Gideon over here, but then Jackson over there, who was her friend before, is like he's still kind of cool. So anyway, Gideon, who's like a white guy who is the like town doctor, they become friends, and he's not racist. You kind of think he might be in the beginning, but then he redeems himself. And so he shows her the secrets of Summerland because he realizes like she's smart and she's tough and like she could actually get us out of here. And so that I thought was really interesting. And so he shows her how they power the city, which is a bunch of shamblers and a giant metal cage just rolling around in this cage, generating energy for the city. Like,
think of like a giant hamster wheel.
A giant hamster wheel, exactly.
Just like an old man sitting in the corner, and that's what they're trying to get after.
Yeah, it's so crazy. They just like walk past this thing, and there's just a bunch of shamblers in there, and Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, which that alludes back to the mayor's house, because that's how that's how the guy got bitten, because
Mhm.
the mayor was using shamblers to light up his own house.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, obviously, like, I think that's pretty obvious, like, huge metaphor for like how, all this growth that did happen after slavery. So much of it was still on the backs of, freed slaves, black and brown people. It just, yeah. So that was like terrifying and amazing, because it was
yeah.
like, to me, as like someone who's a reader and a writer, like authors do these things and you're just like, wow, how crazy. Um, anyway, so yeah, and then the rest of it is basically just her figuring out about Summerland and defeating the sheriff, and that ends up being the second man that she kills, which was a crazy moment. And then also, I think worth talking about how Catherine, she makes a sacrifice. Almost ends up being that her going along with Jane's kind of, it wasn't like a plan necessarily, but I think Jane's just smart. So when Catherine thinks she has a plan when she tells the sheriff that Catherine is actually a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it does end up working to their advantage, because later on, she realizes Catherine is the key to get to the sheriff, because the one kind of, I don't know if you'd even call it a redeeming quality, but the one kind of human element of the sheriff, because he's pretty terrible, is that he used to love someone. He did have a wife who he loved, and she was taken by a shambler. And so he's kind of got that hole in his heart. And so she realizes he fancies Catherine. He thinks she's very pretty. And so she and Catherine like coincide, they work together. And so, they make it clear that she never like sleeps with him or anything. Because there are
actually, one of the cool things actually throughout this book is that they actually allude to Catherine, and I think this doesn't happen very often in books. They actually allude to Catherine being asexual. She has zero romantic feelings. She's never felt attraction.
Yeah,
she's not repulsed by sex. She just she just doesn't, and I thought that was cool that they do that with a lot of characters, is they allude to their sexuality, but not in an overt way. Like, and that's something too. This is not really a spoiler for the second book at all, because there's way more than this. But in the second book too, like, it's people fall in love with people, and they don't talk about it. It's just, this is their reality, and I think that's really cool. But that's one of the things I kind of loved, is that I feel like there are not a lot of asexual characters that are portrayed in like a genuine way. And I think they really allude to Catherine as being like, it's not even that she doesn't have time for it. She just talks about how like she's just never felt it. Like, she'll see Jane and the way Jane looks at people. I think she was describing the way Jane looked at Gideon, or the way that Jane looked at Jackson. And she was like, that's just never.
Yeah. And I think it ends up being, if you think about it, it kind of ends up being one of her, I don't want to say superpowers, one of her powers, because she has that similar quality to Jane, where she is able to code switch. It's brought up later that she was like raised by a woman of questionable virtue. So she was like brought up in a brothel. And
then she went and hung out with the swamps of Louisiana with what was her name? The voodoo queen, who's like, this is like a real life element too. Oh, what was her name? Oh my god. That was cool too.
We'll come to you later and you'll shout it out. It was. So she's just a really interesting character. So she is able to code switch as well, more just to like white people. Because obviously these women who were in brothels, and mostly white women, which there's a brothel in Summerland as well. But of course. So Utopia, there has to be a brothel, because Utopia is for men. Anyway, so she's able to code switch to affluent white people. And so she has to have a lot of interaction with people who are like the monsters. Like she uses, that's one thing that she can do. And so it's not just her beauty, it's also like the way that she can communicate and present herself. And so she's able to kind of get mixed in with these people. She flirts with a couple other guys too to help get them out of some situations, but mainly it's the sheriff. And I think, you know, she is able to like kind of give them what they want and put herself out there in a way that someone who actually did have more sexual feelings, it would get in the way of that. You know, like
way for Jane plenty of times.
if you're actually kind of like, what if she actually was kind of attracted to the sheriff? You know, like, you know, so it allows her to be kind of cold-hearted in a way and like actually do these things that she just knows are things that you do if you're someone who's kind of courting someone or you're friendly with someone. She never like goes out like a super flirtatious. It's still kind of like endearingly sweet the way that she interacts with these people, because she's funny. She's like,
oh yeah.
She's really smart and she's like is funny and she will like have some funny one-liners or say something in just a way where they don't get that she's making fun of them, but like she actually is, which I really enjoyed that. So I really enjoyed Catherine as a character. I enjoyed Jane and Catherine equally. Like I couldn't pick a favorite, and then together was just ended up being amazing. Yeah. So I'm glad that she really developed that relationship. Like the main relationship in this book is a female friendship. It's not.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that too. I think one of the important things about Catherine is that she didn't like playing white. She was actually very proud of her heritage, and hated that she was having to deny such a big part of herself. And I really liked that because at the time, I mean, for years and years and years, it's always, you know, it was always like, if you can pass as white, pass as white. And people were usually fine with it. Like, okay, this is like, this is fine. Like I'm happy rejecting this part of me in order to like do this. And with Catherine, it was like almost painful for her, like to like, it was very painful for her.
Yeah.
To reject that part of herself that she was very proud of.
Yeah.
And so she actually she went along with it, but she was actually kind of mad at Jane too.
Yeah.
Because, how dare you? I would rather be with you guys, as uncomfortable as it is, than be living on this affluent part of town. And so she was kind of like, Jane, you better have a freaking plan, because I don't like living as a white person. I am proud of who I am.
Yeah. I mean, she says, like, I think she says, like, I'm living a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, in that specific context, like, I think it makes sense, but it's not fun for anyone to live a lie, you know? And so I think, I'm not going to lie, I had this moment of like, oh, like, that's great that when Jane put her off as a white woman, like, I like would say I saw that as a good thing. And so I think it was really great that Justina Ireland put that moment, and it's a really powerful moment. Like she's got like a little monologue in there where she really talks about, she goes into depth about why, like her emotional intelligence, you know, like she really goes into depth about why it's not a good thing to have to lie about who you are and present to someone that's not who you are and hide something about yourself that
it's so important.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I thought that was another really, there's just so many moments in this book.
So good, you guys. If you haven't gotten anything from this discussion, like we've been talking for an hour, I'm looking at the time, we're like over an hour at this point. It feels like we just started. It really does.
I haven't really gotten into it yet.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like we could literally just like keep talking about it. You know, but I think we probably need to get to the end now. But essentially, it does end kind of a cliffhanger, which is kind of why I like bought the second book right away. I was like, I need to know what happens. Yeah. So what ends up happening is the sheriff does end up falling in love with Catherine, which Jane actually kind of has this moment of feeling sad for him in like a very split second, because she's like, oh, I really did kind of mess with this person's feelings. And she always gets over it. But she does have this moment of like, oh, he actually really did fall for her. Like, I know this was my plan, but like he actually did. And she was kind of like surprised for a second because he is just like such an inhuman person. And so, and his dad, who's like the preacher. So that's kind of like the two aspects of the town. It's like law and order and religion. And they're using religion, which is very American, by the way. Country was built upon this principle of like using religion to justify slavery, or using religion to justify work being done on the backs of Black and brown people. And one of the things that they even brought up was they called them the descendants of Ham, which were like the cursed people. And this was like the mark of their curse was being Black and brown, which I have heard before within like circles. I think I had heard it as like the mark of Cain. They said the descendants of Ham, so I hadn't heard it that way, but that is like a real religious thing that people believe.
Yeah.
So they kind of use religion, and they like forcefully preach at both so it's kind of like different ranks. Of course, Black and brown people are at the bottom, and then you had like the girls that worked in the brothel, and then you had the men and women who weren't part of the rich part of town. And it's kind of like they all had to live together, and then they had to worship together, but they were like forced to worship. Like they always get preached at, like literally every night during dinner. So that was kind of like the religious aspect of it. And so the preacher and the sheriff were kind of like in it together.
Well, that's his dad.
Yeah. They were in it together. And so Catherine kind of worms her way. She doesn't really try, to be honest. She doesn't have to because she's really gorgeous. So she doesn't really have to try, but she kind of goes along with it without ever like losing her integrity. Like I'll go on a walk with you, but it's got to be like in front of people, or you know.
She's so smart. Like she uses those rules of virtue.
Yeah.
To help her get what she wants, but not cross a barrier she doesn't want to cross.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And so all of a sudden, like honestly, it kind of starts going downhill super abruptly. It's not like everything was going well. It's just that there was kind of like this kind of lull, and they were trying to figure out what to do next. And then all of a sudden, shit just hits the fan. Like, all of a sudden there's shamblers in town.
Yeah.
And people are like, why are there shamblers? And in the midst of the shamblers being in town, the sheriff also finds out that Catherine isn't white and that they've been lying to them. And they found it out from like a family, I think, that had moved to town. And they were like,
it was like kind of it was like the thing that you knew was eventually going to happen. Like obviously they were going to get caught, and it was just like because the story that they had told like didn't match up because they connected themselves to a family back in Baltimore, and then another family was like, oh, that's not true. Like she's not who she says she is.
Yes, exactly. And so the sheriff finds out, and he is like, I'm killing you. Like he's just he's like, I am killing both of you. This is your end. And then they're like, no, we need to go. There are gamblers. Like, we gotta go. And they're like, no, this isn't happening. This is a safe space. There are no shamblers. And they are denying it. There are literally, like, they describe it as like shamblers are like coming through town. Like you can see them. And like the people of the town are like congregating on the steps of the sheriff's place. And like, let's go, let's go. And he's like, no. This is Summerlin. That can't happen here. No, not happening. And well, the lighting on my computer just changed. That was weird. It makes me look more spooky on my end. So he's like, this isn't happening. The preacher's like, no, we're fine. And then they're trying to kill Catherine, and Jane, like zero hesitation, just straight up like shoots the sheriff in his head. Like while he's holding on to Catherine, Jane is just
And it was to the point where like at some point she thinks she might have gotten Catherine.
Yeah,
But she did.
in a way,
So
she's like, I don't really care, but I do care because we're kind of friends now. But
yeah,
also, I needed to die.
yeah, yeah. She definitely sees it as like this man needs to die. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely you see, you know, if you're uncomfortable with that, then you have to sit with that for a minute, I think, and think about why that is. Because, you know, to me, it's just that like, I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but you know, it is just that like that is the world that she's grown up in. Is that killing is a thing that you just do when you need to do it. It's not necessarily a reflection on yourself. Um, so yeah, so I thought that that whole scene was amazing, and that's not even like that was crazy. But then you find out. Wait, do you find out before or after about the truth about her mom?
I think it's kind of around the same time because it's kind of like it's kind of
That's
talking
before.
about like why she was so comfortable with killing him because in her mind
Yeah,
she's like, I've done this before.
actually, yeah, you're right. I think that's like right before she kills the sheriff is when she's she tells they have this they haven't had a flashback for a while, and then there's a flashback and you're like, why is there a flashback? And then it's talking about how like, yeah, I've done this before, I killed my dad. And then that explains to you this thing that you didn't even know was a big deal.
Yeah. Well, because they also made it sound like in the beginning that her dad had turned into a shambler, and that's not true.
It's
He had
yeah, there's so
because
many.
they said he had been like looming over her mom's bed, but it actually wasn't because he was a shambler. It's because he was drunk and he found out that Jane was his kid.
Yeah,
Like he somehow found out, and so he got drunk and then like was looming over the bed, and her mom like managed to like calm him down because, and then that's how we find out about her mom is because her mom pretended to be a white woman because she was traveling with her like not master but like kind of, and she died, like the white woman she was with died,
yeah,
and so she just pretended to be her
yeah,
because it was like one of those like arranged marriage kind of things. And so she was like, well, he's expecting a woman, a white woman, and I look like a white woman, so I'll just show up and pretend I'm her. um and so it's you find out that like not only was he never a shambler, but it was Jane who killed him, and she just
yeah.
like grabbed a gun and while he was sleeping shot him right between the eyes. And
Yeah.
like,
Well, I think but there's the thing that happens that spurns her to do that. It gets violent with
mhm.
Jane, and not even because is it because he knows yet that
I think
she,
he had,
he just
yeah,
gets drunk?
I think he had found out, and I think that's why they had that like that moment where he was looming over the bed.
Yeah. So he gets violent with Jane for sure.
Mhm.
And her mom clocks him with like a book or something,
Yeah,
and Jane escapes. And then that night, she just goes and kills him. And then they just accept it. The family, that makes her mom, all of a sudden now her mom is like the woman of the house. And, you know, it's like still shambler times. Like all they really do, it's, you know, people are getting shamblered, bitten all the time.
yeah.
So they just make it look like he was bitten by a shambler. So throughout the book, like she actually says, like, I think when my dad turned shambler or something like that, but it's like code. She's saying code to herself, like when I killed my dad.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that was
That was
whoa.
a big, yeah, that was, I think, I mean, there were a lot of big things that happened, but I think that was one of the biggest.
Yeah,
Where,
I mean everything was like running up, preparing us. Like, oh, she went there. Like, oh, she went there, and then she went there.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
So yeah, so she ends up killing the sheriff, and then I think it's Catherine who ends up shooting the preacher. I think because I think
Yeah,
Catherine got involved somehow.
yeah. I kind of forget.
But they don't actually kill him. They just leave him bleeding for the
Yeah,
shamblers to eat.
yeah.
um, and
Which
he's
I'm not gonna lie, I found that satisfying.
oh yeah, as he's dying, he's still trying to preach to them like, no, this is like a perfect place. Like that's not true. You're lying. You're disgusting. That kind of thing.
Yeah, he never comes
Um,
around.
so the Chambers kind of come and take over, and they have to hightail it out of town. So it's kind of like this ragtag crew of like Catherine and Jane and Jackson and his little sister Lily, which is actually kind of how they ended up there in the first place, because Lily had gone missing.
Yeah.
And ended up there. And so Lily and then the Duchess, who was like in charge of the brothel, and then two of the girls from the brothel ended up going with them. And they kind of are like heading to a place called Nicodemus, which was supposed to be a place where people of all races were living in harmony.
Yeah.
And that's where they're kind of
so
headed.
Like, I know you were like, what happens? Where's Gideon? Like,
I know, because like you don't see Gideon again. They're trying to get out, and Gideon he's just like nowhere to be found. Like they cannot find it. And in fact, she tries to go down into the tunnel to escape at one point, and he had locked it. Like no one could get in.
Yeah. So he gets away. Yeah, which I totally get. I was sort of like, well, yeah, I'm definitely getting the sequel. But, like, I did think that she still did a good job in making, even though it's very clear that this isn't the end of the story, I thought that she did a good job in making it feel kind of thematically somewhat tied up, that they're able to break out of Summerlin, basically, and they're able to, like, they're like a unit now, like they're like a family. And so it's like that feeling of like finding your tribe. Found family, sometimes they call it, and the idea of like going west.
They kind of ended with a sense of purpose. Like, Jane ends up finding a letter from her mom, and because she had been the whole time throughout the book, at the beginning of every chapter, it's like Jane writing to her mom, and then at the very end, she finds a letter, and the mom is like, "I'm in California, come find me." Is what she says. It's like, "I'm in California, come find me." And so, she's walking with Catherine next to the wagon, and she's like, "We're going to California." And that's just like, it's like this new like purpose of like, okay, I've been through all of this, but now I'm going to find my mom, because that's all I wanted to do this whole time.
Yeah. So, I mean, cool ending. I mean, amazing ending, really, when you put all of it together. And it's an amazing book. I personally just have one more thing I want to talk about before we make our final bookcase for humanity. I have a question. Okay, so I don't want you to spoil it if it's in the second book, but we never find out why exactly the dead rise. Like, there's no origin story other than, my guess would be obviously something to do with the Civil War and fighting over whether or not we should have slaves.
Yeah, I think that's kind of in the book. They even say, I think the preacher even says like, "Oh, this is the dead were rising because we were trying to free the Black people." And it was like, that was their argument. It was like, that's why it's God's wrath, because we were trying to free the slaves. Is some of their, and then you have the scientists, I think a few times were like, "Oh no, this is like a sickness," or whatever, which is why they were trying to make a vaccine, is they were like, "Oh no, this is like a disease."
Yeah. That is the thing we don't find out, is I'm kind of guessing we find out in the second book, because Gideon, the one guy who seems to actually have some smarts about him, does have a vaccine, and he does inject Jane with it, and she never gets bitten. So we never get to see in the first book. So if you read it, maybe in the second book. Megan's trying really hard not to give anything away right now. I can tell.
Poker face big time right now. Like, I'm like,
Anyway, so yeah, I think my guess was like, again, like, unless it's in the second book, there's like some more of a reason given. I think maybe it was just intentional that like we don't know, and how crazy like that there's a pandemic happening right now. Not that I'm trying to say anything about that. Like, obviously it's a pandemic, it's real, but it was the timing though was still just a little bit like,
yes. Sorry, my cat is like hungry. She's like meowing. So yeah, that was Dread Nation. If you guys are interested, the sequel is called Deathless Divide. Really good.
Yeah, I'll put that in the thing. I guess we can use this as a moment to quickly shout out our bookshop link, because we haven't really talked about this too much on the page. It's a hard thing to like really get across in a tweet, but it is kind of there if you look. Now when we share links, unless the book doesn't exist on bookshop.org, but most of them do, we have like affiliate links, so you can actually support us. It's, you know, it's still like one of those small percentage kickbacks every time you would click the link and buy the book. But it is a way to do that. But I will say it's a decent affiliate link. It's not like it's not like 10 cents. It's a little bit more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and all of that kind of goes, it does. All of that goes right back into book club stuff. We're not taking any of it. It's literally just going right back into like upkeep, I guess, and to grow. We have a lot of plans.
Yeah.
we want to do with the book club. So that kind of goes to making like mine and Kateri's dreams come true for the book club.
But yeah, like paying for the StreamYard, paying for like the thing we use to make our graphics, paying some other things too. And the big one though that does go back to you guys is that we are going to start doing technically 2 giveaways a month. We're going to host a giveaway on our Twitter account. We're going to host a giveaway on our Instagram account. So follow us if you're not following us. So we will be giving away the book of the month. So we're still trying to figure out how to do that for any of you who have been reading along, like you're the people that we care about the most, that we want to really do this for. So we're going to do that this coming week. So if you think we should actually do it sooner, well, this is for the November book, which we'll announce in a second. So if you think we should do it sooner, let us know. We're going to feel that out and not entirely sure how to do that because it is bookshop.org. So it's not Amazon. So there's no like 2-day shipping. It does take a little bit longer to get to you. And then the other part before I forget, we get a kickback, but it also, our account gets tied to an indie bookstore of our choosing. So right now it's tied to, oh, look, there goes our little tail. I love it. We actually had to see him this time too. Hi, Duke. Sorry, just squeal people away right when I'm trying to tell us important information. Yes, Pegasus Books in Seattle, Washington right now is the indie bookstore that we're tied to. So when you click our links, you're supporting us and you're supporting indie bookstores. So I think that's win-win all around. Mm-hmm. And not supporting Amazon. So anyway, let's make our bookcase for humanity and then announce the book, and then we'll let you get away to your other Halloween shenanigans. Reader friends. So, I have to say, I just really like what you were getting at in the beginning, which is the idea of resilience. I think the fact that we're not reading a nonfiction, we're reading, this zombie genre, more plot-based kind of book, even though, like we've said a million times, like this book has a lot of freaking substance. I really like your idea of resilience. I feel like that is a thing that, like, through fiction, through a novel, that you can identify with. Mm-hmm. Not all of us, but we live in the Western society and a developed nation. There are certain hardships that luckily, like, we don't have to deal with, and obviously it still doesn't compare at all to going through something terrible, but it's not that we don't go through terrible things too. Right. Obviously the idea is that this is a book that is exploring things that have happened in real life in history, have happened in recent history, and are even happening today. So I think the boundaries there are really blurry. And so I think that if you want to have some sort of connection to those life experiences, I think reading a novel is a great way to do that. So that's not super specific to this book, but those are kind of some of my thoughts. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, going back to resiliency, that's really what I got out of it, is that, and I really want to kind of bring this point home, is that when I say resilience, I don't mean that like everything's okay. That's not what I mean. I just mean that we as human beings are just way stronger than we think we are. Even during, COVID, think about it. We've been doing this for almost a year. And I remember when it first started and people were like, we are never going to get through this. And yet we are.
Yeah, we thought it was the end of the world. We thought it was the apocalypse.
Yeah, not without losses, obviously. I never want to like downplay that ever, because there have been some big losses. But we are getting through it. It's not the best. There are definitely still people who are winning, and definitely those of us who are losing. Yeah. But we are kind of carving out our little pieces of humanity still. The book club, for example, I don't think would have been as big as it is without it, because people were looking for a sense of community. I see people who have gone back to school because it gave them time to. I've seen people who are like, well, I'm going to run for office, some kind of office, because I don't like what's happening, and so you do see some really beautiful things coming out of it. And like, so when I say resiliency, definitely I don't want anyone to think I'm being this like happy-go-lucky, optimistic, like non-realistic version of resiliency. I just mean that humans are strong, even if we may not always feel that way. And I think this book definitely does a really good job of showing that. I think it also does a good job of showing that the monsters aren't always who you think they are. Sometimes you're the monster. We all have those really dark things inside of us. I think everybody does. And it's just about like overcoming them, or just coming to terms with them, really. Even Jane, it's not that she overcomes it, she comes to terms with it. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of part of it too, is that with the light, there's always going to be the dark. And so you kind of have to accept all parts of yourself and then figure out like, how to live with that. And I think that's definitely something that we all kind of have to learn.
Yeah. And I think like Jane and Catherine are both good examples of how to like love yourself and celebrate yourself despite the world around you being terrible. And I think that that's like a really important thing, because that's, I think, a big part of what it means to be resilient. Like she kind of, it's her narration of the story, but I kind of read it sometimes as like her cheeky talking to herself, like getting through things, thinking of like, it almost makes me think of like the like super corny stuff they say on like Guardians of the Galaxy, and like they're going to kill the bad guys. And they like throw a one-liner in there, and it's like, sometimes it's those little things that really can help you get through.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, great bookcase for humanity. Cheers.
I feel like I want to do like a and scene. I hope you guys enjoyed that discussion. We tried to make sure you listen to the spoiler. I did throw up the banner right when the spoilers came in. And so we hope you guys enjoy it. And I don't have the book with me, but I know you definitely do. So here is our November book of the month, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliot. I'm assuming that's how it says it. I'm already more than halfway through. It's a really beautiful book so far. So I'm excited.
I'll just read like the first little paragraph right here, because this is in particular one that's like hard to like describe in your own words. So the Mohawk phrase for depression can be roughly translated to a mind spread out on the ground. In this urgent and visceral work, Alicia Elliot explores how apt a description that is for the ongoing effects of personal, intergenerational, and colonial traumas she and so many Native people have experienced. And it gets into, get into a lot of different things, like obviously the topics of race, parenthood, love, art, mental illness, poverty, sexual assault, gentrification, representation. So, yeah, this is, I think, not even that long.
No.
But sounds like it has a lot in it. And it's like you said it's a collection of essays. So
it is. So it's not a memoir, it's a collection of essays. And one of the things that I love the most is that she doesn't, and I think this is how the essay kind of lends itself really well to this, is that it's not just her writing about her experiences. She's also putting in history and science and math. And it's like, yes, it's like her story, but it's also, it makes you think harder in two different ways. So yeah, I think, and it's a really good story right on the heels of this one too, to be honest, because she also talks about re-education camps or re-education schools, stuff like that. And she kind of gets into it from the Canadian side, which I had never heard before.
Yeah, it's definitely good for us as, I assume we're mostly Americans, to know about stuff like that and not be like left in the dark, because it's like we're all on this continent.
And we're on this planet, like we're on this planet. Like, so yeah, it's a beautiful book so far. Stay tuned for maybe a surprise.
Something good in the works.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys check it out. If you do, please go through our bookshop link. We would greatly appreciate it.
Down below if you're on YouTube, and it will be on our page. Yes. We always have the link to our book on our pinned tweet. Tweet on our Twitter page.
I was going to say, stick it to the man while celebrating some women. Supporting some badass ladies right here. Yes. So make sure you guys are looking out for more information on that. And thank you so much. We have some comments. Yeah, I was about to throw some up.
Go ahead, Megan.
I got it.
Thanks, Steven.
Hey.
Pastor Steve, thank you.
He's one of our OGs. And Stephanie, another consistent supporter. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming. I feel like we say this every time, but it really, really means a lot to both of us. I literally dressed up for you guys. So like, obviously I love, I love this. So I dressed up as a zombie for you guys. But yeah, it really means a lot to us whenever you guys engage with our Twitter, engage with us on YouTube. It just really means a lot. Kateri and I put a lot of we put a lot of heart and time into this. So it just really means a lot every time you guys show up.
Absolutely. I ditto that. So thank you all. Happy Halloween.
Yes. Happy Halloween. I wanted to, I don't know if you guys have seen, I think this was a Vine back in the day, but your earrings, I want to go, look at, it's freaking bats. I love Halloween.
Random, but I like it.
Love it. Yeah. Happy Halloween, you guys.
See you next time. Hopefully we'll see you for a fun live stream soon, and a happy hour and all that jazz. So
yes. So bye.